third worship service was about paths to healing. So we wanted to provide testimonial and story about ways that good mixing and huddling occurs in our congregations.
This is about much more than worship, creating multi-generational ministry or multi-generational community, because we all have different needs and there need to be different programs to meet those different needs. So just as one particular style of worship, even among groups of adults, won't meet everyone's need, there's a need to have both opportunities for the whole community to be together and experience the fullness of all of the generations connecting, and opportunities for what we call huddling, opportunities for people to be with others who are at their own age and stage in life, so that they can share more deeply an experience that they know others understand very directly. Those of you who were with us yesterday might be wondering about how to handle those folks who might feel a little bit cranky about the thought of everyone being together all the time at church. You'll be glad to know that Robert Pasmino, an instructor at Andover Newton Theological School, describes whole church ministry in a way that stresses the importance of what he calls mixing and huddling. Huddling refers to life stage-based spiritual development experiences, such as religious education classes for children, youth groups, parenting groups, and caring for your aging parents groups. Mixing refers to the times that the whole community is together in all of its ages and stages, coming together for spiritual development, for worship, and/or fellowship, like multi-generational worship, mixed generation religious education experiences, social action projects, church picnics, all of those social things we do together. Huddling and mixing, Pasmino contends, are both equally important in a religious community, and having a balance is the most effective way to minister to our whole congregation. Most importantly, mixing informs and enhances huddling, and huddling informs and enhances mixing. For instance, children's worship is really effective if it pays attention to the developmental needs of the age groups contained in the worship space walls, at the same time that it teaches children to do church, mirroring the liturgy of adult worship, but geared toward the developmental needs of the children. That way, when multi-generational worship happens in the whole church community, kids are familiar with and used to the flow of worship, the hymns, and the ritual, and are able to take part fully and feel like it belongs to them as well. Multi-generational gatherings should always communicate that each person has a story, something unique and precious to add to the whole. It should also hold up the practices of deep listening and authentic sharing. Church is one of the few places, as we mentioned yesterday, left in this culture in which we have the opportunity to engage in meaningful, extra-familial relationships with one another across those generations.
When I began working as Director of Religious Education at First Parish in Milton, Massachusetts, I knew that I wanted to create lifelong Unitarian Universalists. The trouble was I couldn't imagine how to do that without creating lifelong worship enthusiasts. I had a eureka moment when I discovered the words and ministry of Dorothy Pomeroy. Dorothy Pomeroy, wife of former minister of my congregation, Vivian Pomeroy, believed fervently that children did not need more school on Sunday morning, that children needed to have a place to pray, that children needed to have a place to sing, that children needed a place to contemplate God and the universe and to discuss the great timeless themes in the Bible together, just as much as the adults of the church did. A radical idea. Dorothy Pomeroy felt so strongly about the theological task of the church in the life of children that she convinced the church to move a small schoolhouse to our property in 1937 and converted it into a tiny replica of the meeting house with a bell tower, boxed pews, and a mini organ. The children's church was born. Mrs. Pomeroy's experiment was a great success in 1937. After 6 months of its existence, the children's church was entirely self-sustaining, run entirely by the children and youth and Mrs. Pomeroy. And it met every Sunday instead of Sunday school. The children and the children's choir provided all of the music. They read the prayers. They played that little organ. They read the Bible lessons. They rang the bell. They did the ushering. They passed the collection plates. There were so many children and teenagers in the children's church on Sunday mornings that adults couldn't fit into the church at all. So Mrs. Pomeroy was the only adult in a church of 7 to 15-year-olds on Sunday mornings. 7 to 15-year-olds. There it is. Isn't it cute? Inspired by the ministry of Dorothy Pomeroy and convinced that children in the new millennium did not need more school on Sunday mornings either, nor did they need increasingly more entertainment and stimulation, I proposed to the Religious Education Committee at First Parish that we honor the legacy of our children's church and create monthly, hour-long children's worship. They were excited by the idea, both for the spiritual deepening it had the potential to support, and I'm not going to lie, mostly because of the lessening of the religious education teaching commitment. I see some of my religious educators nodding their heads in thankful agreement. And my suggestion, of course, was met with some cries of, "You're crazy. Kids cannot sit still for this long. Kids these days can't sit still for this long." How many times do you hear that? Kids these days, right? TV has killed their attention spans. They couldn't possibly do this. They all have attention deficit disorder, right? And worries that we wouldn't get them a full religious education if we were wasting our weeks away in children's church, right? So we're throwing out some of the curriculum, and what would we do then? I suggested that our children's church services include sacred stories we deemed vitally important to our curriculum, homilies, activities and rituals for deepening rather than sermons, and loads of extra lively hymns. And you know that I like to lead those. My Religious Education Committee was also skeptical when I proposed that all children in grades 1 through 12 meet together in the children's church worship. But first graders and eighth graders have entirely different developmental needs, they said. Of course, they were absolutely right. I studied developmental psychology in graduate school. I was aware of the intellectual, social, and emotional development of children, painfully aware, but I was convinced that spiritual development was different and had to be done within the context of a multi-age, multi-generational worshiping community, even when we were in our huddle of younger folks. So if we aren't even modeling a multi-age community in common worship and fellowship, I said, then we are not giving our children the tools to help us build the world we dream about, a world in which we recognize one another's common humanity across difference, a world in which we answer the divine calling of building paradise here on earth no matter our age. In 1937, Dorothy Pomeroy recognized the great pitfalls of age segregation within the church and erected the children's church based on the potential of our congregations as a unique place in which we can still nourish and nurture extra-familial, multi-generational community outside of our family multi-generational community. When Boston Sunday Globe reporters asked her if it was difficult to have such a wide age range of children in the children's church, she replied that age segregation makes for a terribly dull society. You have a lot of it in America. 10-year-olds won't play with 15-year-olds. 18-year-olds won't hang out with 25-year-olds. But church is one place where age is of no significance. On that, I based my idea for the children's church, where all meet for worship. If children and youth can learn to connect across age difference, coming outside of the tiny age span boxes they are used to spending time in within school, community, and on sports teams, at birthday parties, and at camp, they gain new ways of interacting with their fellow human beings. They become mentors. They become teachers. They become ministers to one another. Just as they did in 1937, children and youth still need a church as much as their parents do. And it doesn't need to be geared toward the techie-worshiping, TV-watching, sports-playing crowd. It doesn't. In fact, in an age of faster-paced everything and unprecedented demands on our time, and children and youth are often feeling that crunch even more than adults, we each need church, our congregations, a place to be quiet, a place to pray, a place to sing. We need that more than ever. Children and youth need a place to slow down and connect to the essence of who they are and who they want to be. Children long for ritual and spiritual practice and reflection, just as their parents do. Children and youth need a place to be quiet, to pray and meditate, to be inspired to do justice, and to wrestle with universal religious questions. Why am I here? Why do I die? Who is God? Is there a God? There is no reason why children need only to be learning content on Sunday mornings while adults sing and meditate, as if children must always be engaged with the important task of acquiring knowledge, and the adults in our church already know all they need to know. This ignores the fact that children are spiritual beings, just like we are, and it ignores the fact that adults are lifelong learners. Children's Church creates lifelong Unitarian Universalists. It teaches children about shared ministry and leadership from an early age. Children's Church creates lifelong church stewards and a sense of shared ownership of our faith community. Adults are often amazed when they come into the children's church at First Parish that the behavior of our normally energetic small congregants is calm and reverential, or that they sing so loudly and beautifully when they never open their mouths to sing at home. There is a sense of solemnity, of mystery, of honor that the children feel for their tiny church because they know that they are the leaders of it, responsible for its care. They understand that they must minister to one another and that they are responsible for the lay ministry of the church. A child rings the bell. A child leads the opening words. A child lights the chalice. A child writes and says the prayer. A child plays the music. The children's choir sings. They collect an offering every month and vote to donate it to an organization of their choice at the end of the church year. We begin each service with a reminder that the church belongs to the children, that we are sitting in sacred space, holy space. And I ask the children every month what it means to have a sacred space commissioned to them. Sacred means special, a place for children to be with God, one answers. Sacred space is a place where you can be quiet. Something that is sacred is kept in your heart and journeys with you. Another answers, the children know that as co-owners of the children's church, they are responsible for holding the space in such a way that invites the holy into their presence, and they take that responsibility seriously as children's church members and as worship leaders. Moreover, children's worship teaches worship literacy and appreciation. It mirrors the liturgy and style of worship in the main worship space, no matter what that is. We use the same themes, we use the same stories, hymns, readings, doxologies, chalice lighting words at the same time as the adults in the meeting house. In short, children's worship teaches kids and youth to do church. And any church can do it. You don't have to have a cute little children's church like I do, or a chapel, even to do children's worship. You just need some space and some creativity.
And then most recently, a trip of a lifetime, a dream come true, really, for me. I led 15 people from All Souls to Spain, where we walked for 6 days and 72 miles on the Camino de Santiago. That pilgrimage group ranged in age from 26 to our eldest member, who took herself on that adventure as a present for her 70th birthday. I just returned on June 18th from this pilgrimage, so in many ways I feel like I'm still in Spain. And I want to share with you that while we were on this adventure, we wanted to share with our All Souls community what we were doing, and so we were blogging along the way. My first experience with blogging. And the youngest member of our group wrote a blog entry that I would like to share with you as just a snapshot of what this trip was like for us. She writes, "What would you guess happens when you mix together a group ranging from 26 to 70, gay, straight, black, white, lifetime UUs, secular Jews, and Missouri Synod Lutherans, avid hikers, and then throw in someone who tires after walking just 2 blocks? Oofta." A week ago, the 16 of us came together in Tui, Spain, most of us virtual strangers. We all knew somebody, nobody knew everybody. Leading up to this trip, I had nervous energy. There was no one I obviously clicked with. All were older than me by at least a decade. And come on, someone tired after walking for only 2 blocks? But it's been a delightful surprise. No real drama, lots of hugs, some tears, tons of laughter, and a wealth of encouragement. I am going to miss these folks when I leave tomorrow morning. This movement from strangers to family happened in stages, through blisters, sweat, and narrative. It's easy to love somebody whose story you know. Of course, we've covered all the basics. Where are you from? What do you do? Do you have any kids? But we were also pushed to go deeper than just the surface, through the daily reflections coming from Shauna, and through the 6 to 8 hours of walking that fill every day. What brought you to the church? Have you thought about your calling? Tell me about your sister, mother, father, children. When have you experienced grace? And perhaps most telling, how are you? When you have way more time than you'd have in an elevator ride to answer that question, that's a big one. I walked with a woman who, nearly 4 decades my senior, had a wealth of insight on personal relationships I'm struggling with. Another inspired me to think of my career in a different light. Still another challenged me to love myself more. You don't get that in a superficial relationship, and you don't get it unless you've got a pool of knowledge and experiences that makes the mingling interesting. I'm not sure what they all learned from me, the youngest. Maybe that ice cream is a great way of finishing a walk or interrupting one. That the Camino is a perfectly fine location for a dance floor, or that it's worth trying a 78-cent bottle of wine. I'll leave it to them to blog about that. But tonight, I walked arm in arm back to the hotel with a woman whose name I didn't know until last week. And there's no doubt in my mind that she'll be part of my All Souls family from now on. If you just look at us from the outside, we're a pretty ragtag bunch. But if you look deeper, and we have, there's a whole lot of mingling going on. What more is there to say? Amen to that. We have in our congregations a lot of mingling to do, my friends, a lot of potential that we underestimate. And so may we bring our groups and communities together so that we might discover how much we have to learn from one another. May it be so. And amen.